Hello guys, it's Otistan coming back here with yet another build guide for Slormancer. So I went hard on the thumbnail and you might be thinking it's clickbait. I'd like to assure you it's not. But first I want you guys to challenge me for my next build. How about you post in a comment a class and a skill that my next build will be based on. Let's say the comment with the more likes win, and if there is only one comment, well, you win. GG. What you can see in the gameplay footage is me clearing Wrath 10 plus 100 with no nether gear and no pure stats. Like I said, it's starter viable. From the look of it, you might be thinking it's just a proc build doing a million hit per second. Wrong. This is actually a dot build. Yep, this is damage over time. All you need to get started is this legendary effect. Once your base damage is based on the percent of the enemy's max HP, well, if the enemy has infinite HP, you also have infinite damage. But 4% is only still 4%. So let's jump straight into it and see how do we scale this 4% into 100%. Without getting into too much detail on how the dot damage part is calculated, this is the formula I have deduced. So you can see that the dot stacks and the increased dot damage are irrelevant to our legendary effect. So the solution is pretty simple and in two parts. The first part is if we can't scale with the amount of stack, then we just have to add more dot effect. So the first dot effect that we take is the burn effect from the imbued fire in the Ancestral Legacy. The second dot that we take comes from the Reaper. The Reaper gives you another dot, and on top of that adds 3% of the enemy's max HP as damage. So it adds another percent of max HP. The third dot that we get comes from the rank 15 dexterity applying slow, which is why it's very important to have whirlwind into your secondary slot, and transforming the slow into a dot effect thanks to this legendary effect on the chest. And finally, the last dot that we take comes from our skills. First, we skewer the enemy with this upgrade of whirlwind, and then thanks to our specialization, we transform the skewer into a dot damage. So if you have done your math correctly, you should know that we have 16% with 4 dots on top of another 3% for a total of 19% of the enemy's max HP per dot tick. But we are still far away from 100%, right? So the solution is to use this glove. Now we can crit and do ancestral damage, and the best part is that applies after the calculation I showed you earlier, which means the 4% can be scaled with crit damage and ancestral strike damage. And that's what we scale. If you look on the right, the stats, you can see that I have a huge amount of crit damage and ancestral strike damage. Obviously I have no pure stat, no nether gear yet, so it's not 100%, but you will reach 100% crit chance and 100% ancestral strike chance with 1000% ancestral strike damage, which means you will deal 190% of the enemy's max HP per tick. And since all the dot damage are elemental base type, all you need is 100 elemental penetration and you bypass all their negation. The only monster that will not get one-shotted is the last boss because he has a built-in mechanic where the damage cannot exceed 5 million. That's it. But everything else will just poof, vanish. So what about defense? How do I roam around with 7k HP? Well, it's the usual suspect. You just put evasion on every piece of gear, and then you finally add the assassin foresight on the helmet, and having 85% chance to dodge, plus another 85% chance not to die when you get hit through that 85% dodge is very good. And on top of that, we add another layer of defense with our block chance. So every time we crit, we get a K chance, and we get a stack of blocks, sorry. And then on top of that, every dot that crit also adds one block stack. And that's why in our Ancestral Legacy, I picked this Ancestral Strike Fireball, because this is not to apply, this is the burn, this is not to um, do flat damage. This is just to get a lot of hit that will trigger a lot of block stack. And later on, when we get the nether gear and have the shroud of the unseen, have another source of evasion stack. So this is the reason why it's in the build, nothing else. The bonus damage is just uh, non-important. Now for the attributes, the order of importance you need to grab the attributes in. First, it's gonna be the dexterity to get the slow, obviously. Then you're gonna get the crit chance from Fury. Then you're gonna get the ancestral strike chance from Zeal. Then you're gonna go all the way for willpower to the elemental pen, where you're gonna get on the way your ancestral strike damage. And finally, every point left that you get gonna go into Fury just to get some more evasions. That's it. So the Ancestral Legacy is pretty straightforward. There's nothing fancy here. First, we grab some elemental damage. Then we get some mana on hit, mana on kill, which help us sustain the whirlwind for infinity, basically. Then we're gonna get that proc of Fireball coming from Ancestral Strike. So it's worth noticing that even if Dot can trigger Ancestral Strike, actually right now the interaction in the game doesn't work and doesn't trigger Fireball. So only the hit from your Whirlwind will work. I expect that to get fixed at some point. Then you get some Fire Res, then you get your Fire Imbue, then you get 7 stack of burn. So if it doesn't matter for our legendary effect, why do we get 7 stack of burn? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's from the belt. The belt gives you more ancestral strike damage for each burn on the enemy. Actually, right now, it doesn't work with dot. It's another interaction that's bugged. Many interactions are bugged for this build, but as you saw, it still works anyway. So it can only grow and get stronger the longer the game goes and bugs get fixed. Then we're gonna get a 3 stack of burn on the way to get our crit chance. That's it. This is it's just a passing node. And this is another interaction that doesn't work for dot. If you expect it to get crit chance on your dot, unfortunately it won't work. It only works for hit. But the wording suggests that it should work, and I also expect this to get fixed later on. As far as skill goes, the most important thing on Whirlwind is to take the skewer. That's it. Everything else is kind of useless because the damage of Whirlwind itself doesn't matter. It's there to apply the dot on top of being a channel skill, which also benefits from the legendary effect. But the increased damage to Whirlwind doesn't apply to this 4%. So the same way the scaling the dot damage doesn't work, the scaling the damage of Whirlwind also doesn't work. So you might want to take the tenacity on top of the skewer, but everything else is up to you. On the crest shield, you actually want just the minimum block stack on top of having 1 extra block stack per second, and that's it. Everything else is meaningless. On the banner though, we have a few good skills, good upgrade. The first one is the weaklings, which give us an extra 15% damage on skewered enemy. Another 100% critical strike damage, which is very, very good. We also get the block chance that we saw earlier, the block stack every time we crit. And finally, we get the dot, also what we saw earlier. The rest of the skill have little to low impact. Yes, we do have one more dot that I forgot to take into account earlier, and that's the rune. The rune is also a dot. It afflicts enemy and deal damage over time. And the only issue is that I have no way to get this up all the time, 100%. So it's very frustrating, but yeah, that's how it is. If anyone has a trick to make it work 100% of the time, let me know. Otherwise, this is the best combination of runes I have found, and it's have an uptime of about 60%, 60 to 70% on very dense map. That's it. And for the ultimatum, just some melee recast chance that works well with the recast chance on the whirlwind. So what are you gonna do when you get to the end game? Well, as soon as you get either a nether amulet or a nether ring, you're gonna replace the one you're using with a shroud of the unseen. This is very important for your survivability. Next, you're gonna put the nimble warrior and replace the ancestral champion, because that's gonna make up for the fact that our ancestral legacy isn't working for the moment. But as soon as this ancestral legacy interaction is fixed, we will be able to swap back the effect. Also, now that you have almost capped your crit chance, you can just cap your ancestral strike chance and then focus on ancestral strike damage. So that's the order you want to focus your pure stat. And finally, you want to get to 90% evasion and stop scaling when you get there. Well, that's it for this video, guys. I'm gonna leave you with some gameplay footage of me fighting Primal Nether boss. And if you need some precision, or if there's something you didn't understand, feel free to leave a comment below. I read all of them and I answer most of the questions there. Also, if you want to help me grow, you know what button to click, so I'd be glad if you decide to click them. See you guys in the next video.